Hello, welcome to another edition of Humble Theology. My name is John, and in this series we are looking at the Westminster Confession of Faith. We are in chapter 6, looking at section 6, the last section of this chapter, covering the fall of man, sin, and the punishment thereof. Within this chapter, we just kind of are reading through the various sections, and I just kind of give a brief commentary. It's not meant to be anything in depth, more or less just familiarization. And for anybody new looking at the Westminster Confession of Faith, I hope this kind of helps you out, and maybe just as a tiny bit of a study guide. I mean, there's plenty of books out there that go way in depth on all the verses cited and how some of the statements were crafted and the history of the Westminster Assembly and the people that comprised it and all those kinds of things. But I'm just trying to give an overview and a general sense of what's being said and kind of some of the takeaways, at least some of the takeaways that I've always gleaned from it and appreciate from the confession. It is not scripture, but it is based on scripture and is considered to be a summary of scripture. So only in that sense does it bear any type of weight, or rather authority, in a Christian's life, as it just works to summarize scripture. And again, as a confession, it's put together systematically to fit part and whole, to give an overview of everything that Christianity is about and saying from Scripture. At your own church, you may not have a confession of faith, like the Westminster, or there's other different confessions out there, Belgic Confession, things like that, Heidelberg Catechism, a teaching work, things like that. But they're meant to be a summary of what that group or what that body that ascribes to a confession or a creed believes. Your own church, you may say, well, I don't have any creed but Christ. But yet your church probably has a statement on the basics of what you believe as a church, about the scriptures or about Christ or about redemption. There's certain things that if asked, you would answer the same way, that way, every time. Well, then that's your confession. That is your creed, so to say. These are more historic and obviously a lot longer because a lot more time was put into what all is Scripture saying at every turn, nook, and cranny that could be summarized down into something as small as a confession. Longer overview, but anyway, so we're in chapter 6 and we're in the last section 6, which states, every sin, both original and actual, being a transgression of the righteous law of God, and contrary thereunto, does in its own nature bring guilt upon the sinner, whereby he is bound over to the wrath of God, and curse of the law, and so made subject to death, with all the miseries, spiritual, temporal, and eternal. So in general, what this is saying, again, within the context of the whole chapter, you can go back and watch those sections 1 through 5, but here section 6, it's just that sin is sin. There's no way to candy coat it, and every sin deserves God's wrath and judgment. There's no tiered system of, well, this is a little white lie. That's a lie. It's a sin. It's an offense to God. It's an eternal offense to God, one that deserves eternal damnation in and of itself. The confession here binds that both original and actual transgressions are bound to our nature. It's part of our fallen nature. It has us, therefore, in a sense, clothed, you can say, in guilt. That's why so many times in Scripture, Jesus makes a parable reference to this change of clothing, be washed and made whiter than snow, or at the wedding feast, the guy needs to be wearing wedding garments. He needs to be wearing the right garments. Well, why? Well, because as sinners, we are clothed in guilt and that means we're standing in line awaiting a judgment. Well, if we're wearing his righteousness, we're not in that line. We're within the family. We're within the banquet. We're within the wedding feast. So it's very important to understand the contrast being made and the seriousness as well. Jesus makes a very strenuous point when it comes to the severity of sin, talking about, well, if you have a problem with lust, and that's stemming from your eyes, the way you look upon others, well, his solution is to then pluck your eyes out. He doesn't say, well, just walk around with sunglasses, or just try not to look, or, we have so many different discussions on modesty and whose fault is it? Is the other person wearing what they wear, or is it my perspective on what they're wearing and all that kind of stuff? And Jesus takes it 10 times, 100 times farther to say, if your problem is lust, you pluck your eyes out. That's how serious we are to take sin. You have a problem with your hands stealing or something like that, he's lop them off. Better to go into heaven lame than into hell with all your body parts, body abilities, all that kind of stuff. So he's stressing how serious sin is. And that's what the confession is trying to make here. There is no lightness about what sin is and who does it. We are sinners. Those sins deserve, like it says here, all the miseries, spiritual, temporal, and eternal. It's only by the grace of God that we're set free from these things. It's only by the blood of Christ that we're set free from the guilt of our sin. But yet, in the same sense, we are not to sit back and take sin lightly, even as a Christian, to just say, well, I'm forgiven. It doesn't matter now. It's covered by the blood. Yes, it is. But if you can look at sin in that way, if you can say you love someone, but yet you can still keep offending them over and over again. And this is a covenant relationship. So think of that as like a marriage. You're married to someone, but you can keep saying to yourself, well, I'm going to go cheat on them again and again and again because I know they'll take me back. Are you really in that marriage? Are you really have that marriage as a focus point, as a real covenant bond in your mind? You probably don't. So that's what the confession is getting at here. We do not ever make light of sin, what it is, and how it's an eternal offense to our Father. So on that serious kind of note there, somber point to reflect and think about, like, subscribe, share. If you have thoughts, feedback, questions, leave questions, comments, and that section below and all that good stuff. And I'll see you next time, and we'll discuss the next chapter. God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.